it's just observing. I think observing yourself and observing what you're eating and observing your life as well can be really powerful for you to start taking action in your health. I find a lot of the time clients are coming to me, they haven't thought about any of these things, and once they have the awareness of it, they then make the changes themselves.
Cue music. Places, everybody places. We're starting in 3, 2.
Welcome to the Autoimmune Hour, where we look at the rise of autoimmune disorders. I've brought together top experts that range from doctors, specialists, nutritionists, researchers, and even those recovering from autoimmune to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information about autoimmunity and how to live your life uninterrupted.
Thank you for joining us here on the Autoimmune Hour with Sharon Saylor. Always seek sound legal, medical, and or professional advice regarding any problems, conditions, and any of the recommendations you see, hear, or read here on the Autoimmune Hour, Understanding Autoimmune, and Life Interrupted Radio. Join the Autoimmune Hour's Courage Club. Sign up now at understandingautoimmune.com. Now, back to your host, Sharon Saylor.
Welcome, everyone, to the Autoimmune Hour. I'm Sharon Saylor from SharonSaylor.com, and as always, it's my honor and pleasure to be with you on another brand new episode. My goodness, I just got home from a long trip, the longest trip I've taken post-pandemic. What an adventure. Anyway, my friend Liberty and I talked about it on last week's show, and I'm still recovering here, but it's doing well when you're back in your environment and have the things that you're used to doing that continue to help you thrive. It's always so much easier. And tonight we have a very special guest, and we're going to talk about a wide range of things, but mostly on nutrition. I think a lot of us have a lot of questions, food sensitivities. I know that at the height of my condition, I was seeking out lots of messages, and I got a lot of mixed messages, and it got me very confused. So tonight we've invited BJ Hamilton, and she is an expert. She's known as the Autoimmunity Nutritionist, and that's also her website, the autoimmunitynutritionist.com. And after 25 years of suffering with multiple autoimmune conditions that affected her energy, skin, hair, and joints, BJ discovered after studying immunology and training as a nutritionist, and she uncovered the root causes of her own issues, and she was able to transform her health, and she now lives symptom-free. So this is a lady after my own heart. That's what I did. The reason I started the show here was I've got to learn everything I can because this is not going to be my end result. So we'll get deeper into her bio, but I just want to be able to bring her on right away. So welcome to the show, BJ. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks so much for having me here, Sharon. I'm really pleased to be here to share my story with you.
Absolutely. Let's share a little bit about your survivor to thriver story so people can understand how far you actually had to come.
Yeah, so my story started actually when I was 7 years old, probably before that really. But when I was 7 years old, my parents discovered a circular patch of hair loss at the back of my head. And I went to see the dermatologist and got diagnosed with alopecia areata. It was a long time ago, and not many people really knew what was causing it. We knew it was to do with the immune system, and my parents made a few little changes for me. So I started having eggs in the morning instead of cereal. But really, once the hair grew back, life continued. But unfortunately, it kept falling out again and again throughout my life until the last say 8 to 10 years where I've been symptom free. But beyond the alopecia, so in my teenage years, I'll be honest, I wasn't eating the best diet. And I was at school and I was very motivated. I probably put a lot of stress on myself at school. I wanted to always achieve lots of different things and be involved in lots of different things. And then I developed psoriasis. And I had psoriasis all over my elbows, down my arms. It was very painful and itchy. And I saw the association at that point with having dairy, because going right back to when I was a baby. The doctors thought I had a dairy allergy. So I'd always had this thing around dairy. And I noticed when I stopped having dairy, my psoriasis did improve. And I struggled with that for a long period of time through my teenage years and my 20s. I was also having lots of other strange symptoms like joint pain. I could never do long distance running. I just didn't feel like I had a lot of energy. And this was when I was only 15, 16 years old. And then when I finally did my A levels, again, I was doing chemistry, maths, biology. I was doing lots of revision. And I was actually going home in the middle of the afternoon and sleeping. And my parents were quite concerned. I'd go to the doctor, have lots of different tests. And after a couple of years, this is how long it took. So I was at university at this point, and I was studying. I actually went on to study a degree in biochemistry and immunology, focusing on autoimmune disease because I'd had several already. But the doctors at the time diagnosed me with a sister virus to the Epstein-Barr virus. That's all they really told me at the time. After this, I then went on to become an accountant. I went traveling and then came back and decided to completely transform my career from working in science to becoming an accountant. And again, more study, more pressure, working at the career ladder. And the fatigue and the joint pain and those types of symptoms got worse. I was still suffering with the skin and hair issues as well. And then after really 10 years of working as an accountant, I was finally diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, which I would say was out of everything the most debilitating. I was having tremors down my body. I wasn't able to live a normal life. I was coping 5 days a week, but then I was just completely exhausted on the weekend. I would sleep most of Saturday and Sunday and be getting home from work and going to lying on the sofa at 6 o'clock, absolutely exhausted. And from that, I was told that I needed to sleep more. I really didn't think that was the right thing for me. So I discovered nutrition and functional medicine. My brother had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis at this point. And I just thought, actually, I want to put my science into practice. And I just thought nutrition was one of the best ways to do that. So I studied as a nutritionist. I learned about functional medicine. I became a member of the Institute of Functional Medicine, did all the functional testing on myself, changed my diet, changed my lifestyle. I would say that was absolutely key because I was always very driven and I wasn't giving myself much of a break, which I really focus on now. I have to focus on it because I just love doing lots of different things and I love my job. And so I do need to really focus on that restoration part. But I have now been symptom free for over 8 years. So after having those symptoms for 25 years, it has been, I feel better now at 40 years old than I did at 15. And I can be more from an energy perspective and a movement and exercise perspective than I've ever been able to do. So it just shows what you can achieve through making the changes to your diet and lifestyle. And I know you've had a similar experience. And that's what I do with my clients now in my clinical practice, in my clinic, the Autoimmune Nutritionist. I work with clients in a similar way to how I was able to transform my own health to see results for them as well.
Absolutely. And I know we've chatted before, and that was one of our common bonds was, okay, it's not fun, it's not easy, but stopping and taking a look at what you're doing and your lifestyle and working backwards and going, okay, what got me here isn't what I want to keep doing because I don't want to be here. So the whole idea behind this is, and it's not fun, I'm not going to make it sound like it's easy, but it's so worthwhile to self-examine what got you here and then how do you get out of it. A couple of the questions I had, I do know that a fair number of what I call traditional doctors are trained just a few hours in nutrition. They're not a deep understanding of the way that food interplays with the body. And I've always been surprised about that because for me, diet change and then lifestyle change, of course, but diet change was one of the major precursors to me getting better and feeling better and having less pain and becoming a thriver. And I find it so difficult to talk with traditional doctors about. So What are the things that you suggest someone who thinks they've got food sensitivities, like you knew dairy might be a thing for you? What would you suggest people, where do they start?
When it comes to food sensitivities, I think observing to start with, so keeping a journal, a food and symptom journal can help. And you can, as long as you're not cutting out whole food groups at a time, you could try out, for example, if you did think that there was an issue with dairy, to see how you felt when you remove it, even for a couple of days. And I know it can take longer to see real results. But I have some clients that are a bit worried about taking things out of the diet, and I understand that. And even when they have, for example, if they're having a lot of bloating or digestive issues, and they take out for either dairy or gluten or something that they feel might be affecting them, they can see results pretty quickly. And that is the kind of gold standard for food sensitivities, is to take it out of the diet and see if your symptoms improve. Now, I would always say to work with a health practitioner, because when we're removing dairy out of the diet or gluten out of the diet, and we just need to be aware of the nutrients in those foods that we need to bring back in, and that's how a nutritionist can help. But that is where you can start, just observing, and then you could take it out of your diet to see how you feel. I would say for some of these food sensitivities, because gluten can damage the gut lining, it can take a lot longer to see improvements, because the cells in the gut take 3 months to regenerate. So sometimes you're going to have to wait a bit longer, dependent on how those foods are affecting you. But then if you're working with a practitioner, you can do a food sensitivity test, which will look at whether you have autoantibodies, so antibodies to certain foods in the blood. And there is a lot of debate around the significance of those antibodies in the blood and whether they are the trigger of your symptoms or an autoimmune disease. But what we do know from those tests is that you do have antibodies to those foods. And if you are having symptoms, then it might give you some good guidance of the foods that are potentially causing your symptoms. So that's how I would use a food sensitivity test. If somebody isn't aware of which foods are affecting them, we can do a food sensitivity test. And if one or two come up, we can trial it, and we can do that elimination process to see if they start feeling better and keeping a symptom and food journal.
Absolutely. I've done both of those. And what I found was interesting is some practitioners would take out whole swaths, like no dairy, no lectins, no nightshades, whatever. And sometimes multiple of those all at the same time. You're like, okay, what do I eat? But what I have found that sometimes, for me anyway, I'm thinking of parsley. Parsley, it's a perfectly great herb. There's nothing wrong with it except for me. It was interesting. We didn't need to take out any of the other things that are related, any other herbs or anything like that. I'm not a scientific plant person, but it was very fascinating to me that parsley tended to give me migraines.
Exactly. And I think I take this approach rather than restricting a lot of different food groups at the beginning, is because since working with lots of different clients now, I realize that people are coming with very restricted diets, or they're reducing their calories, or I find that nutrient deficiencies seem to be more problematic than even a food sensitivity. And a lot of clients will come to me when they've either gone through and been dieting for whatever reason. So they've been having a very low calorie diet with very little nutrients, eating beige foods but very low calorie at the same time. And then I will have people come to me on some form of restricted diet, but not doing it in the way I think the diet was intended, doing it over a very long period of time, which I see with the autoimmune paleo protocol as well. I use it in my clinic with certain clients when I feel like it's necessary. But I think sometimes people can stay on it for a long period of time, not think about some of the foods they're taking out and making sure that they're fully replaced in the diet. So that's why I don't always just restrict one thing. And I'm similar to you in the fact that my main food that was triggering me is part of the nightshade family, but it was specifically chili. And chili was a food that I was eating all the time. I would have it on my scrambled eggs in the morning. I'd have it on my salad at lunch. and I'd have it in my dinner. I loved chili. And then when I did the AIP protocol myself, I then introduced chili after a month, and I had such an extreme reaction. And since then, I have tried to reintroduce it, but if I had a meal that had a lot of chili in it, I would definitely have a reaction. And I always think over time, if I'd been eating that for 10 years and it was causing me that reaction, that's probably done a lot, and that probably creates a lot of issues in my gut, and likely if I had my immune system. So just taking that one thing out, like you were saying with parsley, has probably been transformative for my health.
And it's to finding those ones that are that way. When I got that feedback about the parsley, I rolled my eyes because I didn't really know I ate a lot of it, but you don't think about it if it's just sprinkled on your salad or something that you ordered at a restaurant. So I followed an elimination protocol that we begin to add things back on. And I was noticing my inflammation went way down. I was noticing my joints were softer and easier and not painful and all sorts of things. Until one night I went out to dinner and I didn't see a lot I could eat, but a sweet potato. And so it came and it had something green sprinkled on it. I didn't even think about that. And I just wiped it off with the back of a spoon. Didn't even think about it. But I was shocked that, I don't know, this is the science of Sharon, there was a few molecules left of something, because the next morning I woke up with a massive migraine.
Wow.
I called my nutritionist and she said, "This is great news." And I'm like, "No, really, I've got a headache." She says, "No, it's really great news." Because let's just imagine you were like 95% inflammation when we started. And now because you had this very quick reaction, it's telling us that your inflammation is way down. So that's good news. And this too shall pass. Once it got out of the system, I felt better. But that was that moment where I had that light bulb moment with, okay, this is really serious. Even though it wasn't fun to go through about 24 to 36 hours of a headache, it was that moment where I went, okay, stop fooling around, take this seriously.
Yeah, and I would agree with your nutritionist. I would be very happy with that result with my clients or with myself. You learn so much. Unfortunately, sometimes you have to go through pain to learn things, but at least you know that now. And hopefully you haven't had many migraines since. I talk about being symptom free, but the reality is it'll happen occasionally. And to be able to know, oh yes, I was exposed to mold, or I used that chemical, or I ate that meal, and knowing that is quite empowering. And you know that it's not going to affect you for the long term. It was just a little blip along the way.
Absolutely. And as I mentioned in the opening, I'd been traveling for several weeks. And so I was exposed to a lot of things that I wish I hadn't been. And one of the things I noticed was, it is, even in this day and age where I think a lot of people talk about food sensitivities, maybe too much. And like I said in the opening, throwing out whole food groups, but it's hard to find places to eat out. It was difficult for me to come up with menu items that I could eat. And so I travel a lot with a bag full of my own foods, just in case.
Me too.
So we keep a food journal and we get to probably intuitively have some ideas. I think food journals were hard for me in a bit of a way, because at a meal, it's a mixture of food, a salad with a variety of vegetables and then maybe a protein. And so it was always a little difficult for me to go before the testing to go, oh, it was XYZ. And are there tips on understanding when we keep this food journal, do we get the testing along at the same time? Because I always got confused what part of this meal just made me wake up in the morning feeling really stiff and sore.
It's useful to look at patterns. Has the same ingredient been in a meal that you've eaten? I know that's not always easy, but if you do it, and you don't have to do it every single day, but do it consistently, and when you look back over a month, you may see certain patterns. I had this inclination, and I knew that there was already an issue with dairy. I have actually managed to introduce it now, but I eat it in moderation. I don't eat very regularly. But there are certain other things, like I don't eat gluten. I just knew that was affecting me. I'm not positive for celiac, but I just knew that was affecting me. And it was affecting not my gut, but my brain. But I already had an idea about that. A lot of the time I have clients coming to me and they already suspect that they have an issue with something. They're still eating it, but they do suspect that they have an issue. So that might be something to look out for. But that's why the food sensitivity testing can be very helpful. And I know there is a bit of a debate around the science of them, but anecdotally, I have to say that most people who do that test or review the foods, I get such great feedback from them. Even people that only do the test, I'd love to work with them longer and help them with their gut health and other things. But just by removing some of those foods, they feel so much better. And I think it can be, if there are certain foods that you really react to and you have them in the diet all the time, they are causing the immune system to constantly flare. And that can just leave you with chronic inflammation. And once you take that out, the immune system can get back into balance and you can feel a lot better. So for some people, I do think the food sensitivity testing can help, and it can take out the trial and error of trying all these different foods with every meal. But I would look for patterns if there are similar ingredients. Are you having an ingredient often? It might be that, because if you have your symptoms all the time and you're eating something all the time, then I would look for that as well. So if you're having, say, toast for breakfast, then you're having pasta for lunch and some couscous for dinner, and you have an issue with gluten, then that's 3 hits in the day. Whereas if you're only having eggs every 2 weeks, it's probably not going to be that, because you're only having it once every 2 weeks. It's just observing. I think observing yourself and observing what you're eating and observing your life as well can be really powerful for you to start taking action in your health. I find a lot of the time clients coming to me, they haven't thought about any of these things. And once they have the awareness of it, they then make the changes themselves.
I want to know if this is an old tale or not, but someone once told me that the more you crave a food, not just eat it consistently, but really crave it, you might be sensitive to it. Is that true, or maybe true?
So a lot of the time, if you're eating something sugary or some comfort food, you might relate it to something in your past, going to the sweet shop as a child or eating something as a child. And that gives you that safety and that support feeling when you're going through times of stress or you feel like you need a treat. So there's that aspect of cravings. For example, with pregnant women, it has been shown that there are cravings for nutrients and foods that you actually need. You're growing a whole new person and your body has extra demands. That may be why those cravings occur in pregnancy. But one of the theories around the cravings for foods that we're sensitive to is that they do stimulate us. And again, I read this, and I'm not talking from research that I can quote to you, but the theory is that because they stimulate us, then we want more of it. And that might be one of the reasons why we crave, or at least we sometimes need those foods that we feel we are sensitive to. And I expect that the case when I look at my obsession with chili that I was eating 3 times a day, and it's the one thing I was sensitive to. And I find chili in particular is quite stimulatory, and we know that certain foods like chocolate can affect our neurotransmitters and can affect our serotonin release. So that again might be a reason that we crave those types of foods.
That's important to know. Part of me thought when someone said I couldn't have it, maybe I wanted it more.
Yeah, there's always that aspect, which is why I never tell my clients you can't have it. I'm like, just understand how that's going to affect you, and then you decide.
Oh, that's great. We need to take a quick commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to talk more about the skin issues, because I'm really curious about how our diet plays into skin issues. And so we'll be right back.
The Autoimmune Hour will return after these messages from our sponsors. It's great sponsors like these that keep this show coming to you every week. Be sure and stop by understandingautoimmune.com to learn more.
Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. Om Times Radio. IOM FM.
Hi, it's Olivia Munn with my shelter pets, Frankie and Chance. Say hi, guys. When I adopted them, I discovered that they both have incredible personalities. Chance's sole purpose in life is to love and to be loved. Frankie is a little bit of a scoundrel and always entertaining. They're a little bit of a lot of things, but they're all pure love. Adopt pure love at theshelterpetproject.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council, the Humane Society of the United States, and Maddie's Fund.
Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Times, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Listen and imagine. It takes 5 seconds to send a text, and for those 5 seconds, you're driving blind. Life is worth more than a text. Stay alive. Don't text and drive.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org, a message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, Noise, and the Ad Council.
Hi, this is Sharon, and of course you know me from here on the Autoimmune Hour. Maybe you don't know I'm also an author. My latest book is for kids. It's Pinky Chenille and the Rainbow Hunters, a winner of a 5-star Reader's Favorite Review. It's perfect for your early reader and a great bedtime story for your young adventurers. Check it out over at pinkychenille.com. That's PinkyChenille.com. See you there.
Research shows we apologize up to 10 times a day, and most of the time, we say sorry as a response to someone else's mistake. What if we thanked people instead of all that unnecessary apologizing? So instead of saying, sorry, I'm rambling, you say, thank you for listening. Join us at ProjectForgive.com, a free, non-religious resource on global forgiveness.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Autoimmune Hour. I'm Sharon Saylor from SharonSaylor.com and UnderstandingAutoimmune.com. Be sure and pop over there for all our 400 plus episodes. And tonight we're here with VJ Hamilton. She's known as the Autoimmune Nutritionist, and her website is theautoimmunenutritionist.com. And she has her own personal history and success story with autoimmune conditions. And in that process, like so many thrivers I meet, threw herself into the research and transformed her whole life to understanding functional medicine and nutrition. And that's who she helps now, her clients just like you and I, who are still a little bit confused of what can we eat and can't we eat. And sometimes, and this was in my case, I had multiple medical providers. One would say one thing like, no, take out nightshades. So I took out nightshades. And then they never mentioned lectins or something. And the next one said, take out lectins. And so then I'm down 2. And pretty soon I was down to, as I mentioned, just about 10 foods, which is not healthy. And so I'm a big believer in nutrition. When I was finally diagnosed with an autoimmune condition, was not that long ago, when I had a very obvious condition called dermatomyositis. Dermato means skin, and it's massive skin rashes. It's really a nasty looking thing. And the myositis, everyone, means muscle weakness. I've always been curious because when I changed my diet, I did notice marked improvement. I did many other things to overcome the dermatomyositis, but I think the diet was one of the key ones. And I'm also curious too, because I've heard things like psoriasis and eczema react to diet changes. So what is the play between the skin and our diet?
So the skin needs so many nutrients in order to regenerate and in order for those skin cells to be healthy. And when we are lacking nutrients in our diets, that might be one of the reasons. We might not have the nutrients that are needed for the skin. And some of the key nutrients that are needed for the skin are retinol, so the active form of vitamin A, vitamin D, our omega-3s, the things that are mainly found in animal foods and oily fish. And that can be lacking in a lot of diets. I find a lot of people who will come to me have some nutrient deficiencies, and we can look through their diet and decide whether it's coming from diet. And it would be great if it was as simple as that. But a lot of the time, people have tried a lot of different things by the time they come to me. And as much as eating those nutrient dense foods is very important, and it sounds like some of the foods that you took out were the less nutrient dense foods. So you brought in more nutrient dense foods to eat as a result of that, I expect. But one of the issues can be absorbing and breaking down those foods, and then your cells to be able to utilize those nutrients. So if those aspects aren't optimal, then you can have a nutrient deficiency, even if your diet is nutrient dense. And that's when you need to look at the gut health. And the gut and the skin is very much interlinked. And when we have imbalances or dysbiosis or certain bacteria in the gut, one, it can cause what we call leaky gut syndrome, so an increase in intestinal permeability. And if you have any bacteria that shouldn't be in the gut, so like streptococcus, staphylococcus, those bacteria can get into the bloodstream, and there is evidence to suggest that those bacteria can then affect the skin, and it can cause an inflammatory response at the skin. So the fact that your gut isn't optimized, that can cause an inflammatory response by letting in certain particles, and it can let in foods. So when we're looking at food sensitivities, it may be that there's a breakdown in the gut barrier functions. It's letting more food particles in. And once you work on the gut, you normally find that food sensitivities will go down, and also that inflammatory response will go down. And then the other aspect is how well you are digesting those foods, because a lot of the vitamins and nutrients needed for skin health are fat soluble. So if your liver health is impaired, your gallbladder, your other organs that support your digestion aren't working optimally, then again, that can affect how well you're breaking down fats and proteins. And that means that you're not absorbing those into the bloodstream. Your cells don't have them to use, so the cells of the skin become deprived of those nutrients, and that can affect the inflammatory process. You can have oxidative stress, which is where you have more free radicals and antioxidants that can cause a lot of aging. And with psoriasis, it actually causes more skin growth, and that's why you can end up with those plaques on the skin, because the skin is replicating, but you're not clearing it off your skin. And that's, again, dysfunctional immune response. And those key vitamins like the vitamin D, the vitamin A, the omegas are really important in making sure that the immune system keeps in check and doesn't create an inflammatory response when it shouldn't. That's really how nutrition plays into skin health and these autoimmune skin conditions. And it's just worth noting, we talk a lot about the skin, but really these conditions are systemic. So alopecia areata, psoriasis, eczema, they're systemic. There's always a level of chronic inflammation rather than just feeling like it's just localized to the skin. And that's why I always work on really from an inside out when I'm working on somebody's skin health rather than just looking at topical treatments.
I'm glad you bring that up, because that's the first thought, especially with, I'm going to put in air quotes, simple things like childhood eczema. The first thing that a lot of people recommend is, just put a salve on it or whatever, and not looking at the child's diet. And that's always surprising to me, that because it only makes sense that it's the systemic problem. It just didn't pop up like a bug bite on your skin.
I think because people might get a little bit of relief when they are putting it on the skin. And I think some of these vitamins like retinol you can put on psoriasis, and there's studies around vitamin D on psoriasis as well. And with eczema, there's some topical treatments where you will find relief initially. So you can always see the results, and you can't see the things going on inside your body. So I'm not against anybody using topical creams if they are natural or nutrient-based, but you're not really working on the root of the problem. But I do think it can be a two-pronged approach. I just think it's more important to be working on what's going on inside, because that is where the problem is likely initiated from. And with eczema in particular, because of the bacteria on the skin, and this can happen with acne, but they almost call it a leaky skin barrier. And that's why when you have eczema, if you start scratching it, you can make it worse, because this bacteria can get into different areas in the skin. I know it's so hard not to scratch. I've had psoriasis and acne, but I've had lots of other issues with my skin over the years. And I know when your skin gets itchy, it is so hard not to scratch it, but it can certainly make the situation worse by doing that, because bacteria seems to play such a role in skin conditions. Whereas I know with more of the neurological type autoimmune diseases, there seems to be more of a link with viruses. But for the skin, bacteria like Staphylococcus seems to be a factor. And they've shown a link actually between psoriasis and ulcerative colitis. And the link seems to be between the bacteria that causes both of those conditions.
Wow, this is so fascinating. Everything that they're learning nowadays. I have a question about the skin, though. When I was first diagnosed, one of the explanations I was given was that the skin is one of the larger ways that your body detoxifies. Is that true that the skin is one of the ways the body gets rid of toxins?
It is. It's one of the biggest detox organs, especially when the liver is overwhelmed. So we're exposed to so many toxins every day. I've talked a lot about the bacteria that can be a trigger, but there are lots of other things that can trigger skin conditions, including chemicals. So it might be the environment that you work in that can be exposure to chemicals, but just daily life, from exhaust fumes, and even when we get new furniture, and just everything around us can be, not everything, hopefully not everything, but a lot of the things that we use can become toxic to the body. But the great news is we have our liver and detox function to help us out with that. But it's just when it gets overwhelmed, for example, with other lifestyle or dietary aspects like alcohol or smoking or those types of things, if you're doing those in conjunction with everything else, that we have exposures to plastics in food, and that can overwhelm the body. And what can happen is, yes, your detox function might be working. Remember, your gut health and going to the toilet is part of detox. But if that's overwhelmed, another channel can be through the skin. And in a way, I used to always see my psoriasis as I started being grateful for it, because it was telling me when there were imbalances in my body, something was not right. So as much as it was painful and made me very self-conscious, I would thank my body for it. I got to that point I needed to stop being frustrated. So I was thanking my body for giving me that sign that something was imbalanced. And the cells, when we have a lot of toxicity in the body, don't function as well as they should do. And one, the energy system in the cell isn't working, but also, as I mentioned earlier, you have a buildup of free radicals when you have more toxins in the body, and that can cause inflammation, it can cause aging, so it can cause lots of different issues with the skin. So it may be the case that at that point in your life, I'm not sure what was going on in your life at that point, but your body may have been under pressure in other ways. And as a result of that, it was using another detox function that it had through the skin.
Oh, in hindsight, I can see it very clearly, but unfortunately, that's hindsight.
Yeah. But at least we've learned from it. That's the main thing.
Absolutely. It snuck up a little. You'd go and get one diagnosis, which seemed to work for the symptom of that time, but that built up until all of a sudden it was a major skin issue going on that was hard to ignore. But yes, in hindsight, I can see very clearly how I ended up there. And you're right. I want to talk a little bit about gratitude. I love that you said that, because I'm constantly thanking my body for little signals now that I'm going, okay, I remember when that happens, that's a sign, slow down, Sharon, make sure you're very clear and clean on your protocols, get your rest, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm always finding that the appreciation of those signals in that body, it has changed my outlook on my health. It's been fascinating interplay, just being, and I usually express it out loud, usually by myself, not in a room of other people, but instead of just thinking, thank you, body, I'll say it out loud. Thank you, body, for bringing this to my attention before it got totally out of control.
Yeah, exactly. And I do, with my own story and with yours, I feel like it was the beginning for me getting diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome led me to my dream job. I'm thankful for that in other ways. So I'm thankful for the signs my body gives me, but it has rooted my life along a different path. I was working in large corporates as a chartered accountant, and as much as I've met some amazing people and worked in some great places, it wasn't the right job for me. And I'm in a way, if I hadn't had chronic fatigue syndrome, I don't know if I'd be where I am now, even though the other issues that I was having, I was always living with them and putting up with them. And I think a lot of the time we do, unless it gets more severe, we just live with these symptoms. I was going to work and you would always be worried if you were going to have a breakout, or if someone was going to see, if somebody's going to see you in the gym, or I had all these insecurities around it. And it was quite hard when you're going into business meetings and doing presentations. So that part was quite difficult at the time. But I do look back, and as I said, I am really grateful. It was the beginning for me rather than the end. And I know a lot of people, because I have a free Facebook group and a lot of people sharing there, they feel like this was the beginning for them rather than the end point. So I do feel like, yes, your life, it's likely going to have to change, but it will, for me, and I see my clients going through this, it changes for the better rather than for the worse.
And it's fascinating. I feel that same way too. I certainly wouldn't be doing the autoimmune hour. I think I knew the word, but it meant nothing to me because I hadn't researched it or thought about it other than just as a passing part of my vocabulary until I was diagnosed. And then I'm one of those people like you that throw myself into, okay, I need to figure this out. And I too was putting up with certain symptoms just because, I don't know, maybe I just got used to them. It's sad to say that, but you learn to ignore them, even though in hindsight, I shouldn't have been ignoring them. But they were small enough I could manipulate my life around them.
Yeah, and I see that happening. And sometimes people don't feel like their symptoms are bad enough to go see a doctor. So they don't know what else they can do. So they just put up with it. And they can put up with these symptoms. I did for years. And it's just, oh, that's just me. That's just the way I'm going to be. And it was unfortunate that I had to get really to the point of having quite severe chronic fatigue syndrome to see that I had to make those changes. But by dealing with that, it helped with all my other symptoms anyway. But it's just always worth knowing there are things that you can do for these skin conditions and hair conditions. And if you've got any achy joints, you might not have an arthritis diagnosis. Like I didn't have an arthritis diagnosis, but I wasn't able to do weight bearing on my hands. It was painful opening doors. If that's happening to you, there are things that you can do. It's just always good knowing that, because I think, as you said, you just get used to it. You actually get used to it. You're just living either in pain or you're just living a suboptimal life because you don't realize there's another way.
Absolutely. And not to bash anybody here, but I can think of a couple of medical professionals that at the time I started to feel like I was losing my grip, like I couldn't open jars like I used to, or screw lids on. And that was one of the early signs for me before the dermatomyositis diagnosis. And a lot of that was just, oh, Sharon, you're getting older. It wasn't just me getting the courage to finally say something about it or just ignoring it. But the one time I mentioned something about it, it was rather dismissed about, oh, that's what happens to old women.
Yeah. I think that definitely happens. And I think because I was having those symptoms in my 20s, I just wasn't going to put up with that being an excuse. But I do see it with my clients now that they are told that it's just the age, it's the hormones changing, it's this. And yeah, that could be part of it. But once you get everything in balance, you're able to cope with these transitions and things that happen as we get older. And I would always say that I'm feeling better with age. I'm sure there's a point where there is wear and tear going on in our bodies all the time, but I'm feeling better with age. So I don't ever take that if somebody comes to me and says that's the reason for something, I try and work with them. I'm hoping that most people that I work with or most people that I come into contact with are doing things so they can feel better. And that's my main goal for myself as well.
And I want to point out that for me, and I'm curious to know about your clients, for me, it started out slow. As I made the changes to my diet, I got quite radical and made a lot of changes at once, which I'm not sure I recommend because I wasn't sure which ones were helping and which weren't. But it started out slow, but it was like soon as my body got to a specific point of healing, then it happened very rapid. I don't know if it's like a tipping point to where all the inflammation gets calm enough that all of a sudden it's okay, we're over that hump of that healing thing. It didn't happen overnight for me. It was like I didn't take out something and the next morning feel miraculous.
I very rarely see that. I do occasionally when I make changes to myself. It was when I moved to London about 30 years old and I started making these changes. And initially in the first 6 months, I was feeling 50% better. So it was quite a drastic improvement. But from that 50% better, I was almost the opposite. I felt 50% better, but then it took maybe a couple of years, if I'm honest, to be completely symptom free. And I woke up one day and I just thought the fatigue is just completely gone. And I had no other symptoms. I hadn't really been tracking it and I wish I had, but I just knew that I hadn't had them for such a long time. And then when I got married 8 years, I always know those when I got married, I was at the point of being symptom free. So I always said, yeah, definitely it's been 8 years. But yeah, so mine was a bit slow. And then with clients, I see clients normally start for 3 months. So I normally find that my clients, if they're going to progress, they progress within that 3 months. Then they might have the tools that they need to continue on, or they re-engage at that 3 month mark. And it really depends on how complex the issue is. Is it a food sensitivity? Is it something going on in the gut? Is it something at the cellular level? Is it hormone imbalance? And then you have to dig a bit deeper sometimes. You might have to look at mold toxicity, heavy metal toxicity, and those things do take longer. And so it just really depends on what the root cause is, and it's different for everybody.
I'm glad you brought that up because sometimes my healthcare professionals would have to remind me, don't give up yet, stay the path. Getting some outside motivation definitely helped because sometimes you're like, why am I doing this after a couple of months? In my case, it was like, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of doing it. Having some outside motivation, don't give up, keep going for it. You're doing great. Or reminding me where I started. That was interesting for myself. I remember a doctor told me one time, it was like, I was complaining about certain things and she said, Sharon, I know, but let's look back. And she pulled out the record and she said, you were way down here and now you're way up here. And yes, maybe you slipped a little bit, but you're not way down in that valley that you were in when we first started. And that was helpful to see those little incremental steps that somehow when it's you doing them, you don't notice them as much as somebody from the outside observing might notice.
No, you don't. That's such a great thing to do. And I'll certainly be recommending that to my clients and I wish I'd done that. I just got lost in the process. I was just being consistent and I wish I had kept reflecting back. But yeah, I did eventually. And I was like, oh, wow, look how far I've come. And I think that's what everybody should do because you can go slow and steady. You don't feel like you have to see results very quickly. And normally slow and steady are the results that you're going to see for the long term anyway.
Yeah. Slow and steady for me is what I want because then I know that I'm making progress and it's going to stick.
Exactly.
I don't need a magic wand. We're just down to the last 3 minutes. What would you like to share that I haven't asked about? And then tell everyone how to get a hold of you, BJ.
Yeah, I will keep it brief. We've been talking a lot about nutrition today, but I haven't shared, and I share this a lot with my clients about the holistic approach that I take and the approach that I took as well. And I do really believe that emotional component, stress management, but when I say stress management, I focus more on making sure that you're doing things in life that bring you joy, that make you laugh, that make you feel good, because we can get lost in work and other demands of life and forget to do things that we're passionate about and that we really feel great about. And I think that can be the best antidote against stress, as well as the other stress management practices that you can do, like meditation, yoga, journaling. I love all those as well. within this journey, nutrition plays a big part, but that's key as well. And making sure that you get optimal sleep. That was the last thing on my list, and that certainly made a big difference for me. If you would like to reach out, I do have a free community called the Autoimmunity Community on Facebook. I'd love to see you over there. I run monthly challenges. I share lots of information on different subjects, all linked to autoimmune disease. I have a podcast myself called the Autoimmune Reset, and you can find me over on Instagram at the Autoimmunity Nutritionist if you want to send me a direct message. And you also have my website, which is www.theautoimmunitynutritionist.com. So thank you, Sharon. It's been lovely to chat to you today.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for answering these questions that too often I don't think we can find in the general community of the medical professionals because of the lack of their training that they have to understand about the interplay of nutrition and our well-being. So everyone, that's VJ Hamilton from the autoimmunitynutritionist.com. And thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom with us. And congratulations on being a thriver yourself and keeping it up, because sometimes it takes a little extra effort. So finding your community, as VJ has created her own community, is very important. So everyone, have a great week, whatever your adventures, and join me next week for another brand new episode. Enjoy.
The information provided on the Autoimmune Hour, Understanding Autoimmune, and Life Interrupted Radio, including the websites understandingautoimmune.com and lifeinterruptedradio.com, plus social media, is for educational purposes only. What you read, hear, and see on the Autoimmune Hour, Understanding Autoimmune, and Life Interrupted Radio, and its websites, and other media outlets is based on experience only. The information should never be used for any legal, diagnostic, or treatment purposes.
For the next few minutes, we'll be providing a guided meditation. Meditation is a positive way to help reset your day and does require specific, targeted attention and focus. Please do not drive or operate machinery during this time. As we say here, drive when you drive and meditate when you meditate.
Take a moment right now. Get comfortable. Bring your awareness to any little part of you that needs to find comfort. Maybe wiggle around a little bit. Having your awareness notice each little place that might be uncomfortable, and take the next moment now to find perfect comfort. That's right. Now turn your awareness to your breath. Breathe in and let it out with a sigh. Another deep breath and extend the exhale. Noticing how long you can exhale. Pushing all of that stale air out, out, out. And the next breath, bring your awareness to the cleansing fullness of your lungs. Take a moment to scan your body now with full awareness of every little part. That's right. Bring your awareness to your core, to your center. That's right. You'll know where it feels right. Center your awareness on your core. And notice a golden strand, a golden string, a golden cord going from your core down into the earth, being aware of where it is and how it is. That's right. And travel up that cord back into your core. And notice that golden cord extends up through your head and up into the sky, out into infinity. That's right. Taking a nice deep breath, and on the exhale, just traveling up and down that cord in a natural way, a comfortable way, becoming aware of where it is, how it is. That's right. Knowing that this cord supports you and connects you. That's right. Taking a moment of awareness of the rest of your body in relationship to this golden cord. And thanking the cord for being there. Thanking your body for supporting you and being there. Turn your awareness to coming back to the now, knowing that you can always come back here at any time, any place, just by turning your awareness to your breath, to your core, and to that golden cord. Coming back now, complete, full, alive, in joy, and awake right now. Welcome back.